Today's meeting will be recorded. The recording and meeting presentation will be posted to the Vision Zero website, along with all other Vision Zero related materials, including meeting minutes and upcoming meeting schedules. All panelists will be responsible to mute themselves until they speak. Due to FOIA and public access laws, please refrain from using the chat feature for anything other than our ability to coordinate and help speakers who need assistance using Zoom. The question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane will be used for public comment. Please refrain from entering public comments into the Q&A field until the public comment portion of the meeting takes place. Public comment will take place at the end of the meeting, and participants may raise their virtual hand to signify a desire to speak and wait to be recognized. To do so, you may open the participant pane and click raise hand at the bottom of the panel. Participants may also utilize the question and answer field at the bottom of the participant pane. In-person comments will be prioritized ahead of those entered into the Q&A field. And with that, I'll turn it over to our council chair, Commissioner Euclid.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. So I think we have some new members today on the meeting. So, and it's our first of 2024. So I think it would be helpful to go around and do introductions for everyone tuning in, as well as for our fellow council members to know who's joined the council from their respective agencies. So by way of introduction, my name is Garrett Euclid. I serve as Commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Transportation. And I will turn it over to Department of Public Health.
Good morning. My name is Susan Logan. I am the Director of the Injury Violence Surveillance Unit here at DPH.
Good morning, Susan.
Morning.
Motor Vehicles.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. Jim Politis from the Department of Motor Vehicles, Director of Legislative and Community Affairs, here on behalf of Commissioner Tony Guerrera.
Thanks, Jim. And I think the State Department of Education is joining late today, so we will hold off on introduction for State Department of Ed and go to Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection.
Apologies, little technical difficulties. Hi, my name is Lieutenant Alex Cintron, Commanding Officer of the Traffic Services Unit for CSP, obviously part of DESPP. And this is my first meeting with you guys. It's a pleasure, and please, anything you need, I'll have all my contact info and ready to hop right into this.
Great, thank you, Lieutenant. Aging and Disability Services.
Good morning, Commissioner. This is John Slipka. I am an Executive Assistant to the Commissioner's Office of the Department of Aging and Disability Services. Nice to be with you all this morning. Thanks.
Morning, John. And Division of Criminal Justice.
Morning, everyone. I'm Jackie McMahon. I'm a Supervisory Assistant State's Attorney up in the Wyndham State's Attorney's Office. I'm also the Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor for the state. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Jackie. And I believe Office of Early Childhood is not on today. We had a retirement there in that office, so we'll be looking to get someone to fill that spot. Okay, so we've got introductions there. I do want to move on. Aaron, if you want to show the agenda for today, it is a little bit busy agenda. Two major items to talk about. We'll start with legislative update and then move on to a presentation from the Connecticut Transportation Safety Research Center to talk about the crash data dashboard. We'll talk a little bit about our goals and priorities for 2024 as a council, talk about the next meeting dates and potential topics, open up for public comment. So before we start with the legislative update, we'll move to adoption of the meeting minutes. So do I have a motion to adopt the minutes that were sent out in advance?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from John. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, see some hands raised. Anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition. Okay, so we'll consider those adopted. And before I introduce our speakers for the legislative update, I do want to point out as of March 19th, Connecticut DOT and Yukon tracker shows that as of March 19th of this year, we had 74 fatalities on our roadway. This is outpacing 2022, where at that point we only had 71 fatalities on our roadways. And as we can all remember, 2022 was one of the worst years in decades for Connecticut for roadway fatalities. So we are not on a good trajectory right now for our roadways. And we're hopeful that we can stem the tide of we're seeing the increased fatalities. I think the tame winter we saw led to a lot more people being out on motorcycles. We had multiple motorcycle fatalities so far this year, which is pretty uncommon for this early in the season. So we're going to turn to a legislative update. Right now, we'll have two people from DOT who lead our legislative team. Ann Kleza is our legislative program manager, and Phil Maniero is a legislative advisor. They serve as DOT's leads up at the Capitol for us. They're tracking bills that are going on of safety concern. They'll be able to report out to us what those bills are and what the status is. So Ann and Phil, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the introduction. As the Commissioner said, we are the Legislative Affairs team. So I am going to hand this over to Phil. He's going to go through a couple of the bills that were part of our legislative package, as well as some that we hope will be signed into law, and then I'll go into some bills of concern.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I had some trouble with microphone earlier. Perfect. I'm Phil Maniero. I work with Ann and Commissioner Ugolino at the Department of Transportation. The first bill we have to review is one of our agency proposals, an act automating traffic safety enforcement in work zones and municipalities. It primarily focuses on two programs. First, the work zone speed camera program, which was a pilot program that had finished a little bit earlier in this legislative year. And the second is a municipal red light camera program. Both these are existing programs or existing laws that DOT had helped pass in previous years. And what we did is went back and massaged the language a little bit to make them more effective and hopefully see an even stronger decrease in speeding through work zones and red lights. So the first part of the bill, work zone speed cameras, we tweaked the existing bill. The first thing we did was change a pilot program to make it a full and permanent program, especially after seeing how effective it was. Second thing we did was expanded the ability for camera placement from a limited number of just, I think it was 3 limited access highway zones to any public road where the state is performing a work zone, any state road. It also lowers the triggering speed threshold from 15 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour. So we're going to capture more of the people who are speeding, just we're not speeding as egregiously, but still speeding and posing a danger to workers in zones, in construction zones. Another part of the bill created a violation for those who were traveling 85 miles an hour or more in Connecticut. 85 miles an hour on a limited access highway is a reckless driving issue. So what we did was if you were traveling at 85 miles an hour, you're not going to get the warning in the work zone speed camera program. You're just going to get a ticket. Kind of make it sense that people who are posing a significant danger to the point where the state has a misdemeanor charge for that behavior, they probably shouldn't be getting a warning if they're speeding through our zones. It also there are some reporting requirements in this bill that we will. The Department of Transportation is going to report on how effective the program is, the number of tickets issued, and I believe some other metrics, possibly down the line with license suspensions and such. Part 2 of the bill is the municipal red light camera program. This again was another existing program. So the tweaks that we did would allow the municipalities to hold on to data for a little bit longer than they were able to previously. There are multiple levels of violation, or not multiple levels. You can get a more significant penalty for subsequent violations after your first violation. The trouble with that was, of course, if the municipality can't hold on to the data, they don't know if you have had a previous violation. this language kind of changes and massages that, which should enable municipalities to keep giving people subsequent tickets as opposed to just a first ticket if they, have a certain length of time between their violations. And I think that's this slide, Ian. Thank you. Another one of the bills that Department of Transportation was supporting was SB 424. This limits or lowers the blood alcohol content or the per se DUI limit from 0.08, where it currently stands, to 0.05. It's a sweeping change. It will change and affect every manner of our current DUI laws for driving and boating. And it just lowers that from 0.08 to 0.05, which I think everybody on this council is probably very familiar with the increased benefits and the fact that we start seeing noticeable impairment at 0.05 levels. So this bill is just a pretty straightforward change to 0.05. And if you could, thank you. Oh, did we skip over? Oh, no, there it is. 5330 is the Department of Transportation's agency bill. It had a lot of our recommendations, but specifically related to road safety, there are bicycle traffic control signals, which will use a little, I believe it's a bicycle stencil, so to speak, on the light. Will just, allow bicyclists to have their own lights and a little bit more specific traffic controls for those kinds of transportations. There's also an allowance to let the commissioner temporarily lower posted speed limits on highways. Again, variable speed limits can be required for a number of things: emergencies on highways, weather events, and other changes or events that happen on our highway. Allowing the department to change and control the speed limits a little bit will help us reduce traffic and congestion and other issues when there are incidents on highways. And again, that ability to control and kind of help and direct traffic will promote greater safety on our roadways, especially our highways, during these events. There are two other changes in the bill. The first is a requirement for motorcycle helmets. The department based this language, I believe, on other states. I want to say it's Delaware, but please don't quote me on that yet. Delaware, I see Garrett nodding. They installed a graduated helmet law. Connecticut seeks to do the same thing. The data we've seen is that the first 3 years following the reception or the earning of a motorcycle rider license endorsement on a Connecticut license is the most dangerous period for riders. That's when the gross majority of the crashes seem to occur. So what the department has done is asked that for the first 3 years after you earn your motorcycle license, you're required to wear a helmet. This dovetails with the most dangerous times and should show a pretty significant impact on motorcycle fatalities and significant injuries. It's also worth noting that when the motorcycle riders testified a few years ago, they noted, how you learn to ride a motorcycle is how you continue riding. So even though this law does not mandate universal helmets for all time, it should have a pretty strong impact on those new riders, especially if they're following the law and riding with a helmet for those first 3 years. So we expect that would have a significant impact on motorcycle riders in the state as a whole. The final section is a tweak to our reckless driving laws. Essentially, Connecticut took its prohibition on mobile and electronic devices or cell phone use, if you will, while driving. And they said if you are guilty of that violation while traveling on a limited access highway or interstate, you're going to be guilty of reckless driving now. The simple numbers were that there's a huge amount of reckless driving or a huge amount of distracted driving and deaths that seem to be attributed to distracted driving from cell phones and mobile devices. This was, for lack of a better term, a low-hanging safety fruit that seemed pretty easy to say, hey, this is an irresponsible and pretty reckless activity. So let's make sure the state is saying that formally by adding it to the misdemeanor statute for reckless driving. This is another bill the agency, I believe, testified making comments on, and we would just, thank you, Ann. Just wanted to make sure that the council was aware. House Bill 5204 allows low-speed electric vehicles which conform to the current standing federal regs which is CFR 571.500. It would allow those to be operated on certain roads in Connecticut under 35 miles an hour, I believe, with the approval of the town and OSTA within the Department of Transportation. It's just worth noting that obviously the addition of any other vehicles, especially those that might not meet the same fairly rigorous safety standards of an automobile, can contribute to increased interactions between these different classes of vehicles on the roads, and there may be some associated safety issues that develop as a result of this and the more common usage of these vehicles on the road. So department just kind of wanted to flag it, that it's something we might want to keep an eye on.
Thank you, Phil. I will be talking about Senate Bill 186, which establishes different weight tolerance exemptions for electric vehicles on our roadways. The first would exempt 2,000 pounds from the bridge formula for electric vehicles. The next one increases the weight by 50 pounds for the gross vehicle weight rating threshold, under which a pickup truck not used for commercial purposes may be registered as a passenger vehicle. Because of this, the vehicles will be able to use our parkways, which we've raised as a concern. And just so you know, under current law, pickup trucks not used for commercial purposes that have a threshold below 12,500 pounds need to be registered as combination vehicles. Next area of concern is House Bill 5484. Right now, the department has created a vegetation management plan that we have sent out to the Environment and Transportation committees. This bill requires us to create that plan, which we have done, but it goes a step further and requires both the committees to vote on the plan and vote that it is okay for us to move forward for any vegetation removal. So we're working with the committees on that language. There's another bill, Senate Bill 289, that deals with vegetation management as well. This bill would require any vegetation management that DOT performs to get a permit from DEEP 30 days prior to any of that vegetation management. So that could be weed whacking or mowing to cutting down the trees. So we're working with the Environment Committee on this one because this would be a lot of permits that we would have to go to DEEP for. And the permit also contains some restrictions on machinery usage and hours of operation. So some of that is not operating at night, which is when we do a lot of our road work. And House Bill 5329 deals with road safety audits. The department does these all the time, and we're very happy to do them. But we're working on with the committee. There's a 30-day notice of receipt and letter stating of what will happen with the road safety audit, identifying the scope of the audit and the date of completion. And as we're happy to do these, we just want to work on the language to make sure it conforms to how DOT can handle road safety audits in the future. And the last one, Jim, we put this one on for you for DMV. It deals with the school bus safety account, and it allows a sales tax refund for bus companies that actually purchase new buses with the seatbelts. So municipalities will be able to apply and get reimbursement for the sales tax portion of that. It also requires DMV in collaboration with the Department of Education to inform school districts about the program and how they can apply, because I don't think a lot of municipalities have actually have gone to the legislature to get any funding for this. And it requires the Transportation and Education committees to hold a public hearing in 2030 on the participation levels of this program and its effectiveness. And that is the end of our legislative update. So any questions from the council?
Thanks, Ann. Thanks, Phil. So one item I think we forgot to add in was Senate Bill 423, I think it is, which is a different form of 0.05 where it essentially is a non-criminal offense from 0.05 to 0.079. So both bills advanced out of the Transportation Committee. And so we'll see what the legislature decides to do. They move forward with two different versions of trying to address impaired driving between 0.05 and 0.08 this year. So, and one thing I'll add to, I asked the team to include a whole host of types of safety legislation here. I think, when we think about Vision Zero, we really need to mean zero deaths, zero injuries. So including vegetation management may seem a little bit odd, but back in 2016, we had 29 people just on state roads, not local roads, who were killed either from a tree falling on their vehicle or them crashing into a tree. And in 2023, that was down to, I think, around 12 people. So we're making progress in saving lives from people crashing into trees or having tree branches fall on them. It is, it's one of those avoidable, hopefully avoidable deaths and injuries we can try to eliminate as we move towards a goal of zero fatalities on our roadways. So any questions or any other bills that other agencies are following that you want to bring up for the council's awareness? Don't see any hands up. I see Keith just joined us from Department of Ed. So morning, Keith. Okay. Not seeing any hands up. What we'll do is, since session ends in May, by the next time we meet, we'll have a clear picture of what actually came through this session, and we'll have a final report out for the council on all safety related measures that were adopted by the legislature this session. So thank you, Anne. Thank you, Phil. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a presentation from UConn's Transportation Safety Research Center. Aaron Nash is GIS project manager at UConn and is going to provide us with a crash data dashboard update. I use the crash data repository all the time. Our team at DOT obviously are power users, but wanted to provide an update for the council as well as for members of the public on this extremely valuable resource and how we can best use it. Aaron, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So like the commissioner said, my name is Aaron Nash. I'm the GIS project manager at CTSRC at UConn. I'm here with my director, Dr. Eric Jackson. Today, I'm going to go over Connecticut Crash. We'll talk about the business requirements set forth by the DOT, the development of the project itself, give a demo of the system, and then talk a little bit about future development. So the business requirements, phase one, we were asked by the Department of Transportation to build a spatial system using an Esri framework that could complement the Connecticut Crash Data Repository, the CT-CDR. I'm sure a lot of you have used the CDR. It's a great tool. It gives you a tabular output of crash data. You have a lot of queries you can run, but some individuals were looking to get the data spatially in an Esri system. And so we were using the Esri dashboards and ArcGIS Enterprise. So here's the current flow of the data. We get nightly feeds from the Department of Transportation. That information gets fed into the UConn environment. We have a replica of the crash database in a MUC4 format. And then from there, we do nightly extract, transfer, and loads, ETLs, into 3 different application databases. So every night, we can ensure that our system is updated. And then from there, we collaborate that data that we develop back to the Connecticut DOT's open data portal. because they are the steward of the crash data. So we want to make it available through their public open data portal. So what we did to kind of normalize, not normalize the data, but to bring the data into a usable format was we developed common queries or emphasis areas. We have just under 1 million crashes from 2015 to present. It's a large data set. We have just the crash location, under 1 million records. We have the person and vehicle tables. Again, those are over 1 million, close to 2.5 million for some of them. And we wanted to break out the data and display it in queries or areas of interest. So we took 26 common queries or emphasis areas, and we built some stored procedures to then build these sub data sets out of the crash data itself. And what we're looking to do is to filter and build dashboards around common areas of interest, the way that you would typically look at the crash data. Part of our business requirements were make it informative, user-friendly, and interactive. They wanted a system that was easy to use and not very confusing. So the current table structure is in MUC4. We have 4 main tables that we pull from, and we have common IDs across all 4 tables. So if you're looking to replicate this system, this is kind of how we did it. So we have our crash table, our person table, our vehicle table, and our motorist table. If we wanted to build, let's say, a bicycle emphasis area, we would pull from the crash and the persons. If we wanted to go distracted driving, we'd pull from crash, persons, and motorists. If we wanted to pull from motorcycle and create a motorcycle emphasis area, we'd have to pull from all 4 tables and use these common IDs to fuse the data together. So lessons learned, we tried a number of different methods to get this data out. It's a lot of information. So we worked with a snapshot of the data. We tested it in the Yukon environment. We built what we call dynamic views. And a view is a query of the data. Every time you load a service that hits a view, it has to query those tables, construct the data together, and then push it out. We had extremely poor performance, a lot of timeout errors. We looked at building the geometry, because you have to remember the MUC4 data includes latitude and longitude, but it's not a geographic data set. So we looked at developing or creating the geometry in Python. It worked, but again, it wasn't as stable as we wanted it to be. We registered the data within the geodatabase to increase the performance. We tried increasing the amount of instances on a dedicated service. Still, it wasn't performant. We looked at using coded values in the database itself. So rather than store sunny or windy or rainy, we used the coded values 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you run queries on that data, it's a bit quicker because it's not trying to query on text, it's querying on integers, and then decode that data in the dashboard. So what we ended up with was a stored procedure that runs in SQL. So we have a full-time database developer on staff, and she spent a lot of time writing the stored procedures to actually build this spatial data. Rather than create a view, we actually create a table, an actual real spatial table that's managed in our Esri environment. We use SQL to build the geometry, latitude and longitude, and we use SQL to also index the data itself. And then within phase 1, we were able to build a mobile and desktop optimized dashboard. And then with our feature service configuration, we are publicly pushing out the raw spatial data to anybody who wants to consume it. So this is available through the Department of Transportation open data portal. And from here, some requirements that we did to make the data just a little bit easier to manage is we used a date time to field within the date field. We truncated down some of the field names to no longer than 31 characters. And then we found that because we're publishing data out from 1/1/2015 to today, if we didn't put the time zone on the service itself, it went to 12/31/2014 because there was that time zone difference. So because of that, our temporal queries were off. So we just enable the time zone on the feature service. So we built our applications in ArcGIS Enterprise, and we use this tabbed Experience Builder app as kind of our homepage. And here you can see how this looks. We have individual buttons at the top. Each button will bring you to a different emphasis area dashboard. And then the dashboards themselves, we tried to make these as ADA compliant as we could. We were able to get to AA compliant using a dark theme with contrasting colors and contrasting font. Within these dashboards themselves, we have multiple different types of filtering and queries available. So you could do spatial, meaning you could query by a regional planning organization or a town, or you could do attribute, which is any type of data in the database itself. We put some info tabs within the widgets to explain what's actually going on. And to make the spatial data a bit more performant, we enable clustering on the web map with the spatial filtering. Phase 2, this was an internal pilot project to provide a different view of the MUC4 data. We were looking at not only just publishing out the crash data, but providing a different perspective, being able to allow users to go into the person level data. So if instead of querying by crash type, maybe you want to query by driver age or driver gender, person condition, or even seatbelt use. So we built a whole second series of dashboards to support person level data. We have the vehicle level data currently published. It's in QA right now. The Department of Transportation is reviewing it. And this, again, gives that third view of the data. So it gives you vehicle age, body type, vehicle damage, whether it's special use, a bus, any of those other additional variables that are specific to the vehicle data. So our mission for this project is to provide a full comprehensive view of the MUC data, not just the crash information, but also persons and vehicles. So I'm going to go into a live demo of this now. And run through some of the different options we have available. So if you make it to our homepage, which is gis.cti.uconn.edu/portal, this is where we house all of our publicly available content. This is also some of these apps that are published or shared out to the Department of Transportation's GIS Open Data Portal. So you can get the raw data as well as the published dashboards. So here on the homepage, we have some featured apps. The two we're gonna focus on these two, plus the third one that's not live yet. And we also have our raw data available. So if you work with an agency that has staffed GIS professionals who manage spatial data for your department, any one of these data feeds can be pulled in and consumed within your own environment. So the first one we're going to talk about is our crash dashboards themselves. So on the front page of the crash dashboard, and you load it, we're going to get what we call a story map, which is a narrative. So we have an accident here that was put on by UConn with the support of the Department of Transportation, showing two vehicles that hit each other at different speeds. If we scroll down through this story map, it gives you kind of a vertical view of the data. We talk a little bit about our mission statement here at CTSRC. Note to users, this data is updated nightly, but some reporting agencies can take 30 to 60 days to get it from the authoritative source. So there is data that's constantly being added to our system. A little bit of information about the dashboards themselves. How to apply a filter. So a little bit of an animation here showing you how to go through and use the filter buttons on the left side of the screen. Some information on the info tabs, how to interact with any of the widgets. So if you want to make any of these graphics larger, you could turn data on and off within each one of the widgets themselves. Unfortunately, there are some limitations to the framework we use. The first being there's no print button. So in order for users to extract a graphic out of it, we're recommending to use the print screen function in Windows or the snipping tool. Docking the filter widget. If you want to take that filter menu and dock it so it shows up on your printout, you could do that just by hitting the little print button in the top corner. And then optimal screen size and resolution, supported browsers. There are some people out there who use Internet Explorer instead of Edge or Chrome. So obviously the best experience is using a more modern browser. And then also, if you get this truncated view, if none of these widgets look correct, change your zoom level, zoom out, And that will give you kind of a better view of it. Now, we did go through and develop a whole series of mobile views. So those are available if you wanted to load these on your phone. And then the emphasis area definitions themselves. So what is a fatal crash, right? A crash where at least one person involved was fatally injured and died within 720 hours of the crash, right? This is the definition of the emphasis areas. What does young drivers entail? You know, drivers between the age of 15 and 25. And then the REST service. So if you are a GIS user, if you're doing your own research, you want to pull this into your own map, your own visualizations, this is where you get that endpoint. We also make 2 other open source endpoints available, WMS and WFS, for somebody who might use non-Esri specific software. And then here's just kind of a quick way to use it in your own environment. Anybody could create an ArcGIS Online account. Anybody can go to our feature service endpoints, and anybody could just add that data and start building your own maps and graphics around any of these feature service data. And then I also like to talk about the CDR. It's a great tool. You know, we're not here to replace it with these dashboards. We're here to complement it with just a spatial view of the data. A little bit of history about the CDR. So the first tab we have available is our summary tab. This kind of gives us a high-level overview of all the different emphasis areas and the total amount of crashes within each, as well as the date range. You can see we're 1 day behind. So this goes from 1/1/2015 to 3/26/2024. The data gets loaded overnight. We have a total of 952,703 crashes. And then each one of the totals within the emphasis area is listed below. Now, if I load the pedestrian emphasis area, you can see this has a little bit less than 13,000 crashes. We have our temporal data here on the right side, crashes by year, whether it's fatal or suspected serious injury, by hour of the day, by day of the week, by month of the year, all separated out. We have most severe injury by manner of collision, by route class, roadway surface conditions. We have some fatal injury indicators and suspected serious indicators on the left side, as well as some main areas of interest. Was it within an intersection, work zone related, school bus related? And you can see this little button right here. This is to download the data. So this is a new option that we have available to us in our latest update. It allows us to extract a CSV file from the dashboard itself. So if you want to bring this down into Excel and do your own queries, your own tables, that data is there available to download. Now, on the left side, we have this filter menu. You could run your own date range queries, right, from and to. You could do it by town, by county, by regional planning organization, law enforcement agency, really any of the attribute data that's available to us. We could write a query based off it. Regional planning and county, these are spatial queries. So it just highlights how important the framework we use. We don't have to build derivative data to attach county because it's not in the MUC form. We could do it spatially. So as we find publicly available sources or authoritative sources for like legislative districts, we could start including that as additional spatial filters. Now, here is the person level data. This is published, this is available. Similar welcome screen here. We have another video. I had to put a little graphic here. This is a simulated crash of the mannequin. People said it looked a little bit too realistic, but we slowed it down by like 60% so we could see the car impacting with our simulated pedestrian. But same thing, gives you a lot of information based on how to interact with the dashboards themselves. First page is the summary, lists the total amount of individuals within the crash database itself, and then lists it out by each emphasis area. So it's the same format. Bring us out to our pedestrian. Total number of pedestrians involved in a crash, and then break it out by gender. We have a little indicator here where gender is not identified on the MUC form. And then we could break this out again by age and condition. So if you want to see what ages of individuals are getting hit, we have the same time series, the same temporal data to look at, weather and environmental conditions, injury level by crash location, and then some crash data here. Again, the most amount of pedestrians are getting hit at intersections. You can see at 4,300. Filter menu on the left side. So you could filter by age now or by gender if you wanted to, again, create a subset of this data. One other emphasis area that might be of interest to this group is impaired. Let's load this one. So we talk about making this data performant, right? We can see how this loads. It is fairly quick compared to when we started in the earlier parts of this, but total number of impaired drivers involved in a crash. So this is all impaired drivers. Doesn't include passengers, just the driver themselves. We can see male versus female. We could see age and gender here in this little graphic, crash location. We have airbag and ejection status, restraint system, driver's actions. You can see failed to keep in proper lane is the highest here. Some motorcycle data, distracted, route and environment. Again, the time series, whether or not the it was indicated as speeding or too fast for conditions. This is the person level data. So now I want to move over to the vehicle level data. This is an active QA. We haven't quite published it yet. DOT is still reviewing it. We're making a few changes to it, but similar style story map. Another one of our simulated crashes where we have a motorcycle on a dolly that's being thrown into the side of a Ford Taurus. Here's our full summary. You can see this is almost 1.8 million total number of vehicles in the repository. And then we break it out by each emphasis area. I'm going to go to pedestrian. So striking vehicles in a pedestrian crash. Again, this tells us just a little bit of information. We could break this down by vehicle body type and year, which we could see here. Vehicle age by crash severity. Vehicle damage and body type, whether it's a special function or a bus. We could see there's 52 buses. Registration status, this is something we threw in, so we can compare out of state versus in state. You can see almost a little over 11,000 Connecticut registered vehicles, the second highest being a little less than 300 in New York. We have our temporal data showing our time series. Most harmful event for vehicle, you can see this was pedestrian is the highest. Vehicle action, straight ahead, right? And then contributing circumstances to the vehicle. Now here's the vehicle breakdown. Again, we could write out some of these indicators. You can see SUV versus passenger car, parked car versus bus. And then we also have this filter menu on the left side. So again, kind of a different view of the data. We also have impaired here as well. Another emphasis area of interest. So vehicles with impaired drivers and crashes. You can see about 27,000 vehicles. Here's the vehicle breakdown. Temporal data. Again, kind of the same list of information. So now our goal with this, again, is to provide a full comprehensive view of the crash data and break it out into emphasis areas that are commonly queried across different agencies. Our homepage will look like this once we're finally done. So this would be kind of the main landing page. We dubbed this Connecticut Crash, the crash repository for analytics, statistics, and history. And then you could kind of run between the three different dashboards. Currently, outside of the vehicle dashboards, which are an active QA, we're developing a full view of the crash data. And what I mean by that is rather than break it out into individual emphasis areas, we'll publish the entire data set with filters applied to it. So if you want to write your own queries against the data, filter it down, and then pull that crash data out, that's kind of the future of this, which would then be an additional tab in our main emphasis area. So it'd be welcome, summary, kind of the full view of the crash, and then the 26 emphasis areas after it. So with that, I'll stop here. Turn it back to you.
That's great. Thank you, Aaron. I have a couple questions, but I'll also see if any of the council members have any questions, want to either raise your hand or just jump in. One first question I have for you is, so, and maybe it's just a clarification point for people who don't often use the database or the crash data repository. So sometimes we'll see different numbers for how many fatalities or injuries are out there. And can you just describe a little bit how, there's a difference between the NHTSA FARS data, and so there's a lag between when NHTSA will finalize any crash numbers or fatal numbers, injury numbers, versus what UConn, what Connecticut DOT and others will see in the repository.
I'll defer to Dr. Jackson.
Sure, happy to take that on. So there's several different data sources that we use to compile that data. UConn actually gets data directly from the OCME's office, the Chief Medical Examiner's office. Some of the data that we have within the repository, those fatal reports take quite a while for police departments to finalize. So those reports come in maybe even 6 to 8 months after the crash has actually occurred. So on the fatal ticker that we have and the weekly exports we create, those come out of the OCME office. So those are generated as soon as we are notified that there's been a fatality. And then the repository often lags because we're waiting on the actual report to come in from police departments. And then once it goes over to NHTSA, there's a whole nother level of analysis that takes place. Aaron talked about the 720 days that a fatality has to occur in after the crash, but there's also information that NHTSA kind of processes and puts in, and then the FARS team at the DOT will decide if a crash was intentional or if there was a suicide or if it was a natural causes. So you'll see those fatal numbers actually fluctuate and maybe even reduce over time as the FARS team at the DOT starts investigating each individual crash. So each data source we have has a little bit different numbers, but each one is trying to do its best to try and figure out exactly where we're headed fatal trend wise.
Okay, great. And with respect to the new vehicle data dashboard, what type of data other than like vehicle type? So one thing that we're seeing a lot of, that there's a lot of discussion about the size of vehicles and the weights of the vehicles potentially likely being a contributing factor in more and more fatalities for pedestrians and serious injuries for pedestrians. Will that dashboard in the future be able to like differentiate, be able to parse out vehicles based on model, size, weight? Do you think that's something in the future could be possible?
So we do have vehicle body type by year graphic shown. And it lists, this is the top 10. So we're trying to, again, truncate this list down to make it just a little bit usable. Passenger car is the highest. That goes to SUV, pickup, passenger van, heavy trucks greater than 10,000 pounds. The vehicle model, we did look at that, but because it's I believe it's free text on the MUC form, it's a bit inconsistent. We don't get, it's kind of something I was looking at, right? How many Volkswagens are out there in accidents versus Subarus type thing. But unfortunately, we'd have to normalize the data first in order to get it to a usable format. And that's something we haven't really looked at yet because of time.
So we also have we also have the VIN number of each individual vehicle. So if we can actually hit a VIN database that will give us gross vehicle weight or vehicle size or some of those statistics and make and model information, in future databases, we may be able to start auto-populating some of that. So when we look towards the transition to MUC 6, we're going to start really looking at a lot of the data linkage opportunities that we have. And that's definitely going to be one of the opportunities is what other federal databases exist out there that we can consume and pull in data that, police officers don't have to enter on the side of the road.
That's great. Okay. Thank you. And then a final question for me is on the totality of the repository. So, and the story maps is there an ability, and I saw someone put in a question from the public about being able to parse out which ones have the highest number of crashes, like which segments of roads have the highest level of crashes. Is that data able to be parsed out? So.
Yeah, so I can take that one, Aaron. So we have within CTI and the Safety Center, we have a tool that does that. That's called the Connecticut Roadway Safety Management System, CRSMS. That follows the Highway Safety Manual methods, the 6-step process to be able to identify safety issues and then address them. So we have a network screening tool that's part of that. It's more statistics based and normalizes the data, where the crash data repository is just more crash frequency based. So there's two different kind of methods in the way that we look at the data, whether it's crash frequency or if we really try and get into where are we seeing crashes overrepresented within our transportation network. So we have a completely separate tool that does the safety management and network screening process.
Thanks. And just to clarify, the vehicle one is still in QA here at DOT, so it's not available for the public yet. Once it gets through the DOT process here, UConn's going to release that, right?
Correct, yes. They sent some changes back that we're making right now, and then we'll send it back once we make all those revisions.
Okay.
And then
Excellent.
hopefully, we hope to get that out soon.
Okay. Any questions from council members?
Hi.
Susan? Hi.
Hi, yes. I do have a couple questions. One of them is, I think I might have missed this, but are we able to download the data?
Yes, in each one of the dashboards, there's a total number of accidents or records indicator in the top left-hand corner. There's a little download button that you can click, and it will export the data to a CSV file. So then you can pull it to Excel. The columns do include the geography. So if you didn't want to use our raw spatial data feeds within your own environment, anybody who has access to GIS software can take that data and then build geographic data set out of it. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And the second question, well, I have a couple questions. So another question I have is, I noticed that the data that you showed was counts. Do you have the ability to also calculate rates
No,
based
this
on
is
population?
no, this is like Eric said, there's the CRSMS, which normalizes the data and takes into account a number of different variables. This is just the raw data themselves within graphics. So we're not applying any normalized attribution to kind of compare it to AADTs or anything.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, so this data feed comes from DOT. So how often is this dashboard populated? Like if I look at it, today, what's the lag time?
So the raw data comes from the DOT to UConn nightly. We have a stored procedure that recalculates each emphasis area an hour after the feed gets updated. So the dashboard I showed at this time is the last data that was entered into it was from yesterday.
Okay.
So we're typically about a day behind. So any accidents that happen today that make it into the DOT's network will get updated. There is kind of like I mentioned earlier, a 30 to 60-day lag on average between some reporting agencies. So, we don't get the data right away. They send us kind of like a data dump at the end of the month. Maybe Eric can elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on that, within the DOT and within UConn, we've prioritized fatal crashes, injury crashes, and commercial vehicle crashes. So those jump to the front of the queue, and those are coded the same day the Connecticut DOT receives those through the XML site. So I mean, it could sit at the police department for 2 weeks before it goes over to the DOT, but those high priority type of crashes, they're coded the same day they come into the DOT, and then that night, at 3 a.m. they're pulled into the repository. Our current backlog with PDO crashes, so property damage only crashes, I think is currently at about 2 months. And that's because we've kind of prioritized injury crashes. As soon as they come in, we process them as soon as possible.
So I think I heard this too. So when you have your fatal crashes, did you say that you update the data with the medical examiner data?
So we don't
later on?
update. Yeah, we don't update the repository. So the
Okay.
repository won't have those files unless So sometimes police departments will submit a fast FARS or a PR2 form, which is just basically a notification to the DOT. The problem we have with those is a lot of them, the vast majority of that report is either blank or unknown because it's just an early notification and they haven't completed their actual report. A lot of the times those fatal crash reports may take 6 months before the DOT actually gets them. Some of them the DOT never actually gets because they're part of active litigation, and the police departments don't want to release any of that information because there's pending either lawsuits or litigation going on. So the FARS team and a couple of retired law enforcement officers here at UConn work closely with police departments to try and get that data in as quickly as possible. But there are definitely delays in that coming in. The OCME data is used for the fatal ticker and helps the Connecticut DOT also identify as part of their FARS system which fatals have occurred so they can start tracking and trying to pressure police departments to get that report in as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a Herculean effort here by our DOT staff, our FARS staff, our coders, as well as all the team at UConn that works on this. So a lot of different data sets and fingers in the pot. So
I do have to say that it's great. You know, I have a lot of questions, but I really like this tool and I'm hoping to use it as soon as it's ready. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's one of my home tabs that opens when I start in the morning is the this is the dashboard.
So the crash and the person's dashboards are both live. So you could get those. You could just type in CTDOT open data. They're available through their open data portal, or you can go right to our homepage, which is gis.cti.uconn.edu/portal.
Okay. Seeing no other questions. I do want to thank you both for the presentation. Really helpful. We'll make sure to include a link on the Vision Zero website as well, so people can know where to go in case they didn't write that down. And then I think Aaron can probably send it out to the entirety on the chat as well. So thank you both. I appreciate all the work you did on this.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next agenda item. Do you want to have a discussion amongst us as council members about 2024, what our goals and priorities are, and what we're looking our subcommittees to focus on? As I think, we all know at this point, we're going to continue to have quarterly meetings for the full council. In between is when our subcommittees will meet. We did do a new solicitation for new subcommittee members. So Aaron's been working on that front. And we'll make sure to continue to take the input of those subcommittees into what we discuss here at the council. I think a few different things I want to float is, as we're looking ahead to the next 3 meetings for this calendar year, welcome the input from council members as certain topics that you would like to discuss as a highlighted discussion item. Like today we had the dashboard and the legislative update. If there are specific items that you want us to go and find speakers to invite to speak at the council level, please, you can bring that up now or send that to Aaron and myself. I think also I'd be interested in opening it up to having members of the public recommend topics or items or speakers that they would be interested in the council inviting in. We do have an email address that folks can send that to. Aaron, what's the email address again? I always forget.
It's ctvision0.ct.gov.
There we go. Okay. ctvision0@ct.gov. So I think we're going to continue to ask the subcommittees to the subcommittee chairs meet at least once prior to our next meeting, which is going to be in June. I think having the subcommittees review their work and proposals from 2023 look at what the priorities for the upcoming year should be. I think also continuing to track the implementation of the Vision Zero bill from last legislative session, I think Public Act 23-116, and look at what has been implemented, what's working, what maybe is not working the way they as subcommittee members and we as council members thought or intended, or could be refined. I think that'd be helpful. And then having co-chairs give a progress update during the June meeting. But I do want to turn it over to any council members. If you have thoughts about topics or ideas that you'd like the subcommittees to focus on or the council to focus on over the course of this year. See, no hands up. Oh, Jackie.
Hi, Garrett, and everyone. Thanks. I just had a few ideas. You all know that my primary focus is impaired driving. Traffic safety is so much broader than that. But just some ideas in the impaired driving realm. I'd love to see the subcommittees explore more on improving our blood collection in OUI cases and how we can accomplish that, whether that be through some legislative proposals or expediting the process of requesting warrants in those cases. I think it would also be beneficial to explore more training for officers on crash investigation. Right now, there are specialized units that get called out in serious physical injury, fatal crashes, any kind of crash of significance. But our crashes of any variety are important to try to identify the cause of those and figure out if that's linked somehow to poor driving performance or impairment or something like that. So I think the more officers we have trained to do that, that would be something to consider. And then maybe we dig more into prescription drugs. This is something that's been raised previously in discussions, I know, on the enforcement subcommittee and the education subcommittees. So I'd love to see some more focus on that and how either new prescriptions may alter a person's ability to drive safely on the road or any changes in their prescription and how that might also alter their safe driving behaviors. Those are just kind of three topic areas that I'm curious about.
Thanks, Jackie. I think those are great items. You and I have talked about the data and the lack of data, knowing what's happening on our roadways. I think improving blood collection will be critical there. And I think we are, I believe there's a police phlebotomy training that is going to be going on soon, or so we're dipping our toes into trying to train some police officers in phlebotomy and blood draws. But I think all three of those items are critically important, because if we don't have accurate data as to what's happening with the impairment space, what people are impaired by, or what they have in their system, or what actual, like, the specifics of the crash, then we can't address the root cause of what's actually happening. So thank you for that. I think it's also impairment in general. I think probably I'll want to have a large segment of the next meeting focus on impairment in general, and I think some of these issues could be covered under there too. When I had to go testify this session on the DUI bills, I think there's a lot of misperceptions about what happens in impaired driving, how people react when you're impaired, or even what happens when you're pulled over for impairment. I think a lot of people have this image of like what they see on TV or in movies about someone gets pulled over and a breathalyzer immediately on the side of the road, and then they're arrested as a result of that breathalyzer, versus law enforcement doesn't know when they pull someone over what they're impaired by or what level of impairment they're at. It's just they notice something odd going on the roadways. So that'll be important to talk about impairment, given what we're seeing on the roads. Any other council members have any other items? One thing I did want to flag is we do have some municipalities doing a lot of work to focus on Vision Zero, adopting Vision Zero resolutions. I think it'd be helpful to maybe bring in some of our municipalities who are doing a lot of work on roadway safety in all of its forms to come present to us on what they're doing at the municipal level and what their efforts, what their policy-based solutions are. You know, a lot of it is focused on education, awareness, roadway changes, infrastructure, and enforcement. So we can have some municipal folks come in and talk to us as well. Okay. Seeing no other hands up, what we'll do is we'll just make sure send over some speakers, topics, ideas over to Aaron and myself. And for members of the public, they can send it to ctvision0@ct.gov. And that will help us build out the next the 3 quarterly meetings, as well as this can help advise our subcommittees on the direction moving forward. Okay, Aaron. Oh, I touched on the first bullet there. I jumped ahead. So, Aaron, I'll turn it over to you to talk about the future meeting dates.
Sure. So thank you. Yeah, we released our quarterly schedule for the year. We're going to meet in June, September, and December. We're going to kind of follow the same kind of schedule that the council's been following all along. The schedule also allows, you know, the subcommittees to take in the guidance from the council and gives them some time to get together in between meetings and do their work as well. So that's where we're at. If nobody has anything else to add, we can go ahead and move on to the public comment portion of the
Hey,
meeting.
Aaron?
Yep.
Can I just flag one thing before we do public comment is for those interested, tomorrow NTSB is having a webinar called Traffic Safety Through a Public Health Lens. It's at 1 o'clock tomorrow. So Susan, folks on your team might be interested. I'll forward that to you. But for the public as well, NTSB is having a public traffic safety through a public health lens from 1 to 2:45 tomorrow. Because Public Health Week is coming up the first week of April. So that's why they're focusing on that. Okay. Back to you, Aaron.
Yep. Okay, so like we talked about in the beginning, we do have a few questions in queue, but if you want to speak and ask a question in person, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you then. We'll prioritize those in-person comments over those that are entered in the Q&A field. I believe I do have a raised hand. Robert Dickinson. You should be able to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Comment is about bump outs, which I think are very effective in slowing cars down when they go through an intersection. But one of the problems that if there's no side path for bicycles, the bicycles are forced to merge over into the active traffic lane in order to get through the intersection. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but if ramps were put on those bump outs for the bicycles to go up over them, either with a stop sign at the bump out or yield, in order to avoid the bicycle having to merge into the traffic lane.
Thank you for that comment. I have not seen that before, but we definitely can pass that along to DOT's traffic engineering team for them to take a look at. And I think some municipal folks are on tuning into the meeting as well. So I imagine they'll be taking a look too to see if there's practice or if it's permissible in certain municipalities or other locations across the US.
Okay, thank you. No other raised hands, but we do have a few questions in the Q&A field in queue. The first one, Roger Cron asks, was there a legislative bill to allow electronic or digital warrant for blood draw sampling for blood alcohol when impaired driving is suspected by an officer? I think Jack McMahon has suggested this possible legislation in earlier meetings. So was there a bill put before the legislature?
I don't know, Jackie, if you're able to field that, what the status of e-warrants or blood draws are.
Yeah, so there wasn't a bill that specifically targeted blood draws in OUIs. There are some constitutional and Supreme Court precedent that is very intertwined in that area. So legislation that kind of compels a blood draw would not be allowed. There was some proposal, I believe it came from judicial, to allow for virtual administration of oaths to officers, which is, you know, a necessary step on the path to getting us to the point where we can do electronic warrants for blood draws in Connecticut. So that's something that's been proposed. I'm not sure where that stands right now, whether it's in committee or out of committee, or if it's just not going to go forward, but there was some discussion about it.
Thank you, Jackie.
We had a comment and a question. I don't know if Aaron or Dr. Jackson are still here. Terry Thompson notes that the crash data dashboards are an incredible resource and are used frequently. Can you discuss how some of the new MUC changes affect data output? And again, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if we still have our.
Yeah, I see Dr. Jackson's on.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Yeah, I can provide a little bit of feedback on that. The Fed, NHTSA has just put out a call for proposals for states to upgrade their crash data systems. We're in the process now of going through that MUC 6 data elements and trying to figure out which data elements will be implemented in Connecticut. We don't see dramatic changes into the way that data is going to flow. There are a lot of new potential data elements that are going to be collected on things like e-scooters, e-bikes, a lot of the newer technologies that are coming out in vehicles, so we can start tracking some of the issues that are related with those. But overall, the data flow and process will remain relatively the same. But we are going to look at being able to work with other stakeholders, being able to pull in data from the roadway system and pull in data from potentially DMV or judicial or public health to try and maximize some of the benefits we're seeing from the system itself. But I don't foresee dramatic changes coming. We're already MUC 4 compliant, so we're just going to do an upgrade to MUC 6.
Great,
Thank you for that. We have another question. Charles Foster asks, is there a cycling subcommittee? Before we put that to the council, I can say there's not a specific cycling subcommittee, but nor is there one, say, for motorcyclists or pedestrians either. Generally, all of the different vehicle types and person types are covered within the existing 4 subcommittees. And certainly, having been a part of some of the meetings, the education subcommittee, like in particular, Safe Routes to School is active as part of that. They're definitely considered within those subcommittees. So if I missed anything, if any of the council wants to provide any more context, but they are considered.
No, you got it. Thanks, Aaron.
Last one from Terry Thompson. It's a comment. Polyuse of drugs and alcohol is an important concern, and the enforcement subcommittee is putting this as a priority. So that's something that it sounds like they're already working on.
Thanks, Terry. Yeah, polysubstance use is a major concern of, I think, for everyone in this space. Okay.
I don't see any more questions or raised hands coming in. We can just give it one more minute, I guess.
Okay. As we're wrapping up, Aaron, do you want to send, I sent you the link to the webinar if you want to post it. I can't send out a chat to the entire, all the attendees if you want to send that. And then
Yeah,
we'll make sure to post everything on our website after, all the minutes and everything. So
yeah, just give me one moment and I'll
yeah,
try to go grab that.
So we'll just wrap up as Aaron's doing that. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. You know, make sure, encourage all your friends and colleagues and family members to be aware out there on the roadways, be safe, protect each other, and, you know, take the keys away if someone has is indicating signs of impairment. Just, you're doing it for their safety. So thank you for joining us today, and we will see you all in June.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Thank you.